Let me turn the microphone on. Good morning. Welcome to the September 6th Davidson County Commissioners meeting. If y'all would, Commissioner Shell is out this morning, or he had back surgery last Thursday, so if y'all would keep him in your thoughts and prayers, it'd be appreciated. He should be coming back soon. He's feeling well, so anyhow, I'm going to ask Commissioner McClure to do the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, we do thank you, Lord, for all the blessings that you give to us as individuals and as a county and as a state and as a country. We thank you for your involvement in our lives. Sometimes when we don't recognize it or appreciate it, we still thank you for that. We ask, Lord, that you'd be with Steve as he's still recovering. It's a long time and a painful time, and we would ask that you would just relieve that pain and that you would hasten the healing so he could be back. And we pray for those in our county that are in the same situation and need a touch of healing. Just be with them, Lord. Give them comfort that only you can give. And now, Lord, we would ask you for your presence here at this meeting, that you would give us the wisdom and the discernment to consider and make decisions as necessary. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any recognitions here this morning, Debbie? I don't see any.
I recognize a bunch of them.
Yeah, I recognize Guy over there. He didn't have his name tag flipped. I didn't know who he was there to begin with. Okay, register for public address.
Mr. Vice Chairman, if it would be, go ahead.
Real quick, since this really not recognition, but it is a reminder, Commissioner Trull put something in your box. The Piedmont Triad Regional Council is having their Board of Delegates meeting on the 17th of October. It is actually celebrating their 50th anniversary, and it's at the Terrace at Greensboro Coliseum, but all the commissioners are invited to that. So I'll have Mandy send out something on your counters, but I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion to excuse Commissioner Shell.
Okay, we have a motion to excuse Commissioner Shell. Do we have a second?
Second.
You want this verbally?
Yes, sir.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Whether that was just for this occasion or forever.
Yeah. Well, we probably should amend that for this meeting, but
For this meeting.
we might have just got rid of Steve for a while.
I don't think we can do that.
Okay, anybody registered? Nobody's registered. Okay, adoption of the agenda. Any additions or deletions?
And we have Mr. Chairman, it's been requested that agenda item 8D, discussion on prayer, be removed from the agenda.
Okay, do y'all know when that will be?
It will come back at a later date. We're getting further direction and further information to the board.
Okay. All right, we'll have a motion, amended agenda. We have one from, Commissioner Trull. We have a second.
Second.
Cast your vote, please. Nobody here for public address. Item 8A. What? Okay, I'm sorry.
All of the votes are in, and that motion carries 6-0.
Okay, now, item 8A. Presentation of Guardian.
Yeah, bottom.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Yates and members of the board, I thank you very much for allowing me to come and be with you all this morning to let you know a little bit about why I'm here and what I do. My name is Laura Bodenheimer, lifelong Davidson County resident, and I am proud to be the district administrator of our county's Guardian Ad Litem program. You may have heard of us, you may not have, and I appreciate the moments this morning that I can share with you about what we do and why we do. I'd like to give you a brief history. In 1983, the state of North Carolina decided that every child who enters the court system by way of an abuse or neglect petition filed with the court by the Department of Social Services should have their own representation. They're entitled to their own voice to be presented to the court. Now, it took a few years, but eventually the legislature provided that in each judicial district there would be a guardian ad litem program. It would be staffed with state employees, but the work would be done by volunteers, community citizens who would be recruited, trained, and supervised by the paid staff to go out and see the kids, write a report, and then paired with an attorney, present that child's case to the court. How important is that? It's very important. And in fact, our juvenile court would not operate and could not exist without our program. I want to tell you a brief story about a guy named Joel. Joel was this big man who was bigger than life, worked all his life, had done some very important things in his career. And he decided when he retired that he wanted to work for kids. So he came to us. He was assigned a little boy named Carl. Carl was in the 5th grade and had never had a father figure in his life. Joel went to visit him one day in kindergarten and was reading to him, was talking to him about court, actually. And so all the other little boys just started climbing on Joel, and Joel really didn't know what to do. So he looked up at the kindergarten teacher, and she was kind of looking at him going, "You need to wrap this up." And so he did. But little boy Carl walked Joel out of his kindergarten door and said, "This is my best friend." And he also said, "This is my guardian ad litem." Because you see, he couldn't say the words, but he knew what they meant. Now, Joel is but one of 41 community citizens right here in our county who answered the call, who heard our story about the GAL program and who said, "I can do this." And Joel became Carl's guardian ad litem. Now, Joel can say the words, and he knows what it means, and it's in his heart. Carl can't say the words, but he also knows what it means, and Joel's in his heart. We have 41 Davidson County citizens who advocate for our kids, and there are 152 of them. They're in foster homes, group care, such as American Children's Home or Baptist Children's Home. They're in relative placements, or they might be at home with their parents under close watch by the Department of Social Services. 41 volunteers give about 1,312 hours a month to our kids right here in our county. They're our littlest victims of child abuse and neglect. I'd like to think that saves the state and the county a lot of money. Now, out of that 152, there are 22 teenagers, youth, and babies who don't have a guardian ad litem. They don't have an independent voice, and they don't have a champion of their very own. So you see why I take every chance to talk to our community leaders, such as yourselves, about our program, to make sure you know who we are, what we do, and why we need more folks to join us. Now, where are we located? We're in the courthouse annex. We're in a small suite of offices that we've made welcoming to our community partners, and we've made it as efficient as we possibly can given our space. We actually appreciate very much being there in the annex. You see, we're with the judges and their staff. We're with members of the DA's office, and there are 3 staff members. I couldn't ask for a better team. We have a guardian ad litem supervisor and a guardian ad litem program assistant. We know that the courthouse space will be under renovation soon, and we'll be as helpful as we can. We want to make our needs known, but we'll also be able to work within any necessary constraints that you folks, that our county, and that our state see fit to give us. We're very appreciative of our space. Now, I come to you today not to ask for anything, but I do ask that you know us, that you remember us, that you think about us. You might consider joining us. We love to have community leaders. We love to have regular community citizens join us in our program in our quest to be champion for children. Now, I know you guys have a difficult job to do. And I, as a lifelong Davidson County resident, appreciate our county, I appreciate our people, I appreciate our leaders, our beauty, and I couldn't ask to work in a better environment. I thank you very much for your time this morning. When you hear of the Guardian Ad Litem program, I hope you'll remember Carl, the little 5-year-old boy who has a Guardian Ad Litem. And I hope that you'll remember Joel, who gave his heart and gave his soul and gives his time to the Guardian Ad Litem program so that little boys like Carl can have a voice of their very own. I hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds like a wonderful program.
Thank you, sir. And Laura's gonna be sending me some information, and I'll forward it out to all of you.
Sounds like she needs to have an open house, and, that's what it sounds like.
Yes, sir, we thought of that.
Okay.
Thank you for the idea.
8B, Kathy?
You probably know this gentleman a lot better than I do. You've worked with him before, I think. I am so thankful that we have him back in the county doing the pay study work. He comes very well equipped, as you so rightly know. It's a pleasure to have him here, and I look forward to working with him during this next year and the next couple of years. So it's Matt Reese from PTRC.
Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate your time this morning to allow me to come before you and talk a little bit about what we have planned to engage with you on. It would be remiss of me not to extend a personal invitation to our event on October 17th. We hope to see you all there and hope to make that a hospitable event for you and look forward to it. Last time that I came before you, I believe we were talking about an EMS study and the results of that and how to distribute resources throughout the county. So today we have the excitement and interest of classification and pay study to talk about. So let's talk a little bit about why we would engage in an exercise like that. It is a study of work in the organization, and what that means is that this is really routine maintenance. This is taking the car in for a tune-up, getting an oil change. It's one of those things that we recommend on a fairly regular basis to occur. 5 to 7 years on the outset for smaller organizations, and then more regularly for larger organizations where work tends to be harder to capture on a regular basis. The emphasis also of a study of work in the organization is that it is not a study of individuals. So we're not here to look at individual attributes and where should someone be in the pay matrix, but rather we're to look at the pay matrix itself, the tool that we use to make compensation decisions in Davidson County and how that's structured and how we can move forward. Obviously, part of that is that we're wanting to be sure that we have understood and captured the components of that work. What are the requirements? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed to do that? What are the hazards that folks are exposed to, et cetera, to be sure that we've got all of the appropriate human resources standards captured and put into various documents that we're going to use. So that's part of that routine maintenance that we're doing. All of that then is filtered into the assignment of classes to grades that you all ultimately adopt that is used to make those compensation decisions. We'll talk a little bit more about how the study is structured, but let me just mention at this point that it is a 3-year process. That so over fiscal years 19, 20, and 21 will be engaged in this process and breaking up your employment into those 3 years. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We do have an approach that we want to use when we go about doing this study, and the aim of that is to improve recruitment and retention of your employees. That's what you want to do. You've invested in those employees. It's taken their efforts, your efforts to get them in place, and so we want to improve that process of recruitment and retention of employees during the process that we engage in. Your employees' expertise is highly valued. They're the folks who know their job the best. They're the experts. And so part of this process is to try to capture as much of that knowledge as possible and download it into the systems that we use. So we're going to engage in a variety of processes that we're going to describe to do that, but ultimately it comes back to trying to capture that expertise that your employees have. And then sort of the mantra that we follow in doing this is that classification follows function. And what that means for you is that we're not here to make changes in the organization. We're not here to talk about optimization or any of those kinds of management standards. What we're really coming in to do is to take a snapshot of the organization, the way that it exists, the way that we observe it, and then try to place that into the human resources and compensation context for you. And so we're trying to follow that you all have determined what's the work that should be done in the organization, how that's to be assigned to departments and to individual positions, and that's what we're trying to capture with that. So let me talk a little bit about the process. And so again, on the emphasis that employees are the experts, that the first step in that process, the primary interaction, is for them to engage in completing a questionnaire about the job that they do. It's a fairly lengthy questionnaire that they're going to have. It's a 2-parter questionnaire that there's a section for the employee to complete, a section for the supervisor to complete. So all of that's being affirmed at the appropriate supervisory levels with their review. Then, the PTRC staff comes into the picture at that point, and our job is to primarily perform what's called job evaluation. Now, job evaluation is different than performance evaluation. Performance evaluation is what takes place between supervisor and subordinate to measure how well they're performing in the job. The job evaluation for us is to take what are those components of the job itself, and how do we define and specify what's happening in the job and the requirements that we would apply to that. Part of that process is to be able to do what's called benchmarking. Not all jobs are benchmark jobs. A benchmark job is one that compares itself well to what's happening in other organizations and has a certain commonality to it. We'll try to determine those, and then all of that leads to the labor market assessment that we will perform. We come back and we want to confirm those findings that we have on all the steps that we've talked about with management. Does the snapshot of the organization that we've taken it match what you all see, what your department heads see, what your manager sees in the organization itself? And then ultimately, options for implementing that study will be presented to the board for your consideration and inclusion into the budget process. So let me touch on a few principles that we have of how the process is and what classification looks like. So when we start talking about classifying work, we're really looking at these 8 factors of a job. So what are the working conditions? What are you exposed to? What kinds of hazards are there? What kind of effort does it take to complete the job? What are the physical and working conditions of the work that you have? What kind of public contact do you have? Are folks always happy to see you when you roll up on a scene? Are you communicating positive things to them? Are you having to tell them about some complicated processes and being sure that you can get their understanding of what's going on? What's the variety and complexity of work? Are you a specialist in one particular area, or are you more of a generalist? Everyone has some level of decision-making in their job, whether we're talking about someone who's just answering the phone and passing on information, or whether we're talking about your county manager. Everyone has some level of decision-making in the job, and we try to capture what's happening in that. When you have decision-making, you have consequences of error. And for us, what the consequences of error that we look at are not on the individual, such as discipline or separation from employment. What we're looking at is what's the consequence of error back to Davidson County. Are we talking about financial liabilities? Are we talking about civil liability issues that could be presented? So what's the consequence of error for the work? Supervision given and supervision received, those are 2 sides of the same coin. How closely are you supervised with supervision received? And then do you supervise others, and what direction do you provide to them? And finally, knowledge, skills, and abilities. Pretty much what it says that it is there. We may measure knowledge, skills, and abilities through certificates, degrees, licensure, etc. But ultimately what we're coming back to is what's the knowledge, what's the skill, what are the abilities that are required to do that. So let me touch on the timeline real quick for you of what we have. We'll start orientation sessions with employees in October. That will be the same process for the questionnaires to go out. Then in that November through February time frame, we'll be looking at conducting interviews. We won't interview every single employee, but we'll interview an employee from every job function. So even in classifications that have multiple job functions, like deputy, et cetera, we will interview one that represents each of those areas of work within the broad classification. We'll try to interview everyone who wants to be interviewed. If the employee says, I'd like to be interviewed, I want to engage in this process, then we'll work through that. And I always say that if every single employee says, I want to be interviewed, I'll come up with a different part for this presentation when I'm giving it in the future. But so far that doesn't happen for us. We're able to work through phone interviews and other processes to try to capture what we need to with that. Then around March, we'll be meeting with management to discuss the findings and receive input further from them. And then finally, we estimate sometime in April will be the final presentation summarizing the study that would be there. So let's talk a little bit more about the multi-year, take a deeper dive into that. So we've got 277 classifications that are going to be studied over the 3-year period. We're going to work with your staff to figure out when each of those classes would be studied and what's the best organization of that. We want to put like classifications together, i.e. we want to study all of the clerical administrative series at the same time, that kind of thing. So for the next bullet points there, you see what could possibly be a setup for that. It could be social services, finance, EMS, 911, HR, and zoning kind of collectively all in 1 year. And then we'd have the sheriff's department and the health department in different years. The idea with that is we want to break the employment up into 3 fairly manageable chunks. That helps out with the budget process, that helps out with managing the study itself. So we want to try to balance that, looking at making sure that related classes are in the same year. So it might be that we start with that first group in this first year, but we'll work with your staff to more closely develop that. And then implementation years follow the study years. So then we would study a group in 19, 20, 21, and then you would implement in 20, 21, and 22 with the following fiscal year budget with that. This is a process that goes on fairly regularly in local governments. That for City of High Point, Asheboro, Forsyth, Burlington, Randolph, all of those folks are ones that engage in this 3-year study process. Those that I just mentioned actually are ones that are continually working through this. So then it really does become routine maintenance. And then the more that it becomes that kind of routine maintenance that folks are going, the lower the cost becomes, that there's not these periods of time where you're having to catch up on where that maintenance might have been deferred for multiple years. So we appreciate the opportunity to engage with you in this process and to work with you on it. Looking forward to working with you and your staff. If I can answer any questions for you.
Any questions?
I've got one question. On the multi-year study, the order in which you've got them listed, is that the order in which you plan to implement the study?
Yes, it would be that you would study and then do that. This is the tentative setup of
So it would be the social services first, sheriff department, health department.
That's tentative. I need to confirm that with your staff, but yes, that would be sort of the general thought process.
Mr. True, do you have something?
I got one question. I think it's more for Zebo. This doesn't take place. We've been looking at a pay study. We did the sheriff's department 1 year, and then we do another department yearly or something. This wouldn't take the place of that, would it?
Yes.
Would take the place?
Yeah. We have been doing it in-house for several years. We've decided to get a third party to look at it, being more objective.
Okay.
So this will replace that. So we've kind of completed the cycle of our self thing, and so we were ready to start again, so we chose to do this through the regional council.
Mr. McClure?
Yes, you said that on one of your first slides, you said that when you did this, it was going to be form that you were going to be looking at. What do you compare this to? Will you come back with a recommendation? What is this compared to? What is the benchmark for that?
What are the other entities that we would compare you all to?
Say it again.
The other employers that we would compare you to?
Let's just take one of them, social services. When you do the social services and you do the whole process with social services, what is the result of that? You come up and say that we need to raise then where is the benchmark for that?
That's an excellent question. So the process that has the least amount of change to it, the most conservative to approach, is to maintain your existing pay plan. You have a graded pay plan. And so the recommendations typically come down to moving classes from one grade assignment to another grade assignment. So you might have a social worker that's at, say, a grade 68. And then the assessment of that is, does the class of social worker, as we understand it functioning in Davidson County, need to continue at grade 68, or is it better represented in the market that you choose to compete with at grade 69 or grade 70?
I know this may be a difficult question to answer, but in your experience with these other entities that you've done, what kind of results have you seen coming out of the 3 years?
In terms of cost and those kinds of things?
Yes, sir.
It depends on how well those folks have been looking at their maintenance. In cases where maintenance has been deferred, where it's the salary levels have not been looked at, and there's a particular market that is now being picked, you can have some pretty dramatic increases that you can look at. You could have $1 million implementation, and I've worked with those on many cases. Where an entity has maintained their maintenance, and what I'm hearing is that you've had an internal process and that you've got a pretty established market that you're looking at, then hopefully what we're looking at is a kind of routine maintenance cost, where we're looking at probably something on the order of, $100,000, $150,000 kind of thing that would be typical for where you would see the market moving, but we've also had some fairly regular routine maintenance. But it can be anywhere, for an organization your size, it could be anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000 on an annual basis, depending upon what level of correction we're trying to get at that point in time.
Thank you.
One other question, maybe for Zeb. How long, the study that we've been doing internally, how long did it take us to get through all departments?
I think it took us probably about 4 years, because we got sidetracked. It was supposed to be a 3-year, but it took us about 4.
Ended up taking 4. So, would you say that looking at what we did internally, would the setup of the multi-year study be appropriate to be the next in line that should be, based on the way we did our study? In other words, which departments would be next in line?
Well, I think, Kathy, didn't y'all kind of look over that and see how you wanted to structure the departments?
We did, we need to go back and look at it. I think this is just essentially, how we would go with the lineup. The social services one definitely we want to include in the first run. The others probably, but we do need to go back and look at some of the past years and determine, does this make the most sense? I think the idea here too is to make it an equal distribution of those positions so that one year is not overloaded and another one is fairly uneven. So there's some changes that may occur.
I think what you're asking is, you wouldn't want PT or
PTR, yeah.
PTR to do a study on somebody
That just had one.
that just had a study done
6 months
last year
ago.
by the county.
Yeah.
Right. What, do you know when the last time the sheriff's departments had a study done?
I don't, right off the top of my head. I've looked at that. I can go back and look again.
We've been adjusting them for the last 3 years in the budget based off in-house. We did the majors and captains 3 years ago. 2 years ago, we did the line deputies all the way up to sergeant, and then I think
Right, but we just gave them a raise, but have we looked at what other counties are paying them in that?
that's what we did.
Okay.
They got over and above the county raise because we looked at other entities and tried to get them their pay in line with other entities. But I will say what you're having in law enforcement is, okay, we give our starting deputies a raise. Next thing you know, Archdale and Lexington, they say, oh, well, we got to do it too, and you get in this vicious cycle. But over the last 3 years, we have looked at pay studies for those deputies compared to other entities, and that's how we come up with the numbers we came up with in the budget.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Do you know what our turnover rate is? The county's turnover rate?
Right at 13% when I looked a couple of months ago.
13%. You know what the sheriff's office,
No, we're working on a way to extract that from the payroll system so that we can look at it by department. It's quite a laborious task right now.
well, that's what I was saying. I think you need to look at that by department and see. That may be where, of course, that could be a stress level too in that department that would cause, that turnover rate.
You probably have to compare it to other entities because
Right,
people are getting out of law enforcement, so.
But Mr. Chairman, I think what Matt said earlier, we've done maintenance along each year, so I don't think we're gonna have that big $1 million, study here. I think, we've been doing pretty good, so he's just kinda oiling it up for us here, as he says.
Based on the 12%, does that, correspond with counties of like size, basically what their rates of turnover?
What I see from other counties is a breakdown by department, and it's amazing how many counties don't track turnover. It's really hard to find a county who can give you all that information. Sometimes they will do special calculations for their EMS department or their sheriff's department. They will know what those numbers are, but overall, I'm not sure a lot of them really track it. 13% to me, you know, from where I come from, is not a bad number, but to, you know, utilize it against other counties, Matt, you may be able to answer that better.
Yeah, what we're having right now is a little bit of a spike in turnover because of, in terms of total turnover, because of retirements. You know, we've got a group that's aging out, and so we've seen that number a little higher lately. But it is, Kathy's exactly right, in terms of making that comparison to comparison is really difficult because of the differences in what your incumbency looks like, their age, their experience, and so forth, and what other folks are experiencing. You know, at the point where you get above the number where you are, if you're into the high teens, then that's probably indicative of some structural issues. But anything that's below roughly that 15% mark could be just part of the normal churn that you're going to have. There's a variety of positions that you all employ that traditionally have had a high level of turnover in that.
Did you say that rate was 15%? Is that what?
Yeah, roughly. That's sort of not a real good rule of thumb. It doesn't mean that you want to ignore anything below 15%. Anytime you start getting into the double digits, you kind of want to sort of start taking a look at anything below 10% is basically considered not.
To me, you wouldn't classify retirement as turnover.
It just depends. It depends on.
I wouldn't want that in my records.
Exactly. Exactly. It just depends on how those numbers are counted.
Okay. Commissioner Barrett?
Well, I know what we've heard for years, especially from law enforcement, is that, you know, when the economy turns good, and it is right now, that's when the turnover goes up, because they can find better jobs in other sectors.
Absolutely. And what we found exactly so, Commissioner Barrett, is that where there has not been a lot of pressure on labor and trades classes in recent years, or going back 5-6 years, in the last few years, we really have had some pressures. The housing market has improved and so forth, and those are positions that are really price sensitive. CDL drivers, incredibly price sensitive. So that can have a spike in turnover and can create some labor market issues for an employer for sure.
All right. What do you need us to do on this? Nothing?
I think this is just for informational purposes only. I mean, y'all have already voted to do it in the budget, and so we're just getting ready to give you an update of where we were and how we were proceeding.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. 8C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'll take the lead on this. At one of our previous meetings, Santec came up. The board had instructed us to get with them and to kind of continue the negotiation of whether they would take over the landfill and operate the landfill. And so we've been negotiating. We've actually come up with 3 options. And the last option is, previous option on the table from Santec, they would take over the Lexington, old Lexington Road piece, and then the MRF and all that part on the other side, recycling, we would retain that. And that they would charge us a tipping fee to manage the landfill, and then we would control the gate with the skill house tenants. The third option they have, and then so that left us with, do we operate it ourselves or do we operate it with that option there? The third option they have come up with is a complete turnkey operation where they just take over completely the whole landfill, both sides, the MRF, recycling, the landfill itself, and go with that. What they wouldn't do in any of these options is we would still maintain the box sites and the truck drivers taking stuff back and forth to the landfill. And the third option, as you can see in front of you, first bullet is they would be able to generate up to 180,000 tons a year, and it's capped at that, and they would be able to have the ability to market outside the county with the contiguous counties and Mecklenburg counties. They would be responsible for future cell construction, They would be responsible for all marketing, billing, and collection of disposal fees. They would control the gate. The initial rates for, within Davidson County, our local folks, will remain the same, and the CPI, we've got them to cap that at 1.25% per year. Would be for locally. They would have the ability to charge outside the county whatever they wanted to charge. Let's see. They would be responsible for paying the state solid waste disposal tax. They would fund $2.50 per ton, which will go into an escrow account held by the county for post-closure. They will pay the county a host fee of 8.5% in revenue after reductions of the state disposal taxes and the post-closure fees. They're actually wanting to buy a few more pieces of equipment, but they would purchase existing landfill equipment listed on the attachment which you have at $1,150,000. They would reimburse the county for the phase 2 that we just started for the engineering and permit fees up to $80,000. And they will pay all future costs associated with permitting, engineering, and environmental monitoring activities. They will be responsible for the leachate, which in the first two options, we would be responsible. And let's see, they will provide Davidson County with 30 years of capacity based off of 130,000 tons per year. And so that's their third proposal. So if you get to staff's sheets, which is the big sheets, the summary's kind of on the front page. If you look at, if we run it, if they do it all themselves, or if they just do the option where we run one side, part of one side and they run the other. If you look at the fees over 30 years based off the 1.25% increase, ours, we control the fees. So we're looking at probably in 30 years, we'd be at $43. You get to the bottom, if you look at the turnkey, they would probably be at $45.58. And if you look at the where we run it on one side and the other, we're looking at about a $46.26 fee. Now, if you look down at the bottom, we've only done 20 and 10 years. We didn't go out 30 years. The net revenue, I guess we won't call profit. If we run it, as a county, we try to stay as neutral as we can. We won't be self-sustaining, but we don't make a huge profit. So in 10 years, we'd make $2,238,000. In 20 years, we'd make $2,527,000. If they do the turnkey, they're assuming some risk. So with the assumption of risk, it's kind of like a variable and fixed rate loan. You're not going to get as high a margin. So if they do a turnkey job after 10 years, you're going to make almost $2.7 million, $2,670,000. 20 years, you're going to make about almost $6 million. Now, if the county wants to assume some of the risk with the leachate and having the other side operating the other side of the landfill, the profit margins could get reasonably bigger. Now, like I say, you're looking at almost $9 million over 10 years and almost $21 million over 20 years. So, with that being said, this profit here, by statute, we can't just move it over to the general fund and pay for things like a park or anything like that. Now, we could use it to subsidize the sanitation piece because it is recycling and solid waste collection, which is in the general fund. You basically have three good options here in front of you. It almost gets down to a philosophical issue as well. How much risk do you want to take? How much control do you want to give up? How much outside solid waste are you willing to allow to come into the county? So I will say that between you guys and Matt and Casey, I'm not going to take any credit. They did all the heavy toting. We've negotiated over the last 9 months from where we started to this number here, and we, I hate to, we beat these guys down pretty good, I think, so that's why they're kinda laid over like this. I do have Tim Watts and David Klein with us today. Cheryl couldn't be here. She is under the weather. I know what her problem is. I've had that problem before. Believe me, she's in a lot of pain right now, so. But as she sends her regrets. Guys, have I about hit everything?
You've done an excellent job of summarizing everything, and we just like to thank the board for giving us the opportunity to work with staff to resolve some misunderstandings and working with the county attorney to make sure we can work with the language.
We also met with the county attorney yesterday, and he had like 4 issues, and they're taking them back within the contract, legal issues that statutorily in North Carolina we're not able to do, and they're taking it back to their attorney to work with that. With all that being said, I guess I'll open it up. If you've got some questions for the Santec guys, we're not asking for a decision this morning. We wanted to get the information in front of you to digest and maybe bring it up either at the 11th or the 28th. Is that the next meeting after? 25th meeting for you guys to give staff direction of whether you want us to go ahead and do a contract with Santec, or if you're happy staying where you are. So, Tim and they're here, so if you've got some questions, go ahead.
I got one question, and it's one of my dumb questions here. 'Cause some of this I don't understand, some of it I do. On our first page here, when it says that, I guess it's the first bullet point where it says Santec will market the landfill to waste generations up to a total intake of 180,000 annually.
Right.
And then in the last bullet, it says, will provide Davidson County with 30 years of capacity based on 130,000 per year.
Right.
Does that mean that if with the it wouldn't go 30 years, then would it at 180, would it?
Yes. They're guaranteeing at 180, they will keep the landfill open for 30 years, and if it does fill up, they guarantee that they will take it somewhere else at their cost. Is that?
That is correct, that's correct.
I was looking at the same thing, and it says on that last bullet, it's based on 130,000.
Yeah.
And then the other one, it says that they're gonna solicit to generate a total intake of 180,000, and I don't understand exactly those two numbers.
I think what they're meaning is, as long as the county don't go over 130,000 tons per year, that probably needs to be clarified in the language, but I take it that y'all guaranteeing the county 130. If we start doing 150 ourselves, then y'all can't be liable for the extra 20,000 tons that the county generates.
What we guarantee the county is at 180,000 tons per year, there is 30 years of capacity at the site.
Okay.
So no matter what happens, the landfill can't take in more than 180,000 tons. There's 30 years of life there.
What does that last bullet mean then? It says based on 130.
Just because we were guaranteeing the county that the landfill would be there for 30 years.
So it's 180, 30 years.
The landfill has the capacity for 180,000 tons for 30 years based off our engineering.
So am I understanding correct that it's only 130,000 tons per year that Davidson County can put in that landfill?
No, sir. That is not, what we're saying is, we wanna market the site.
Davidson County, ours is what, 127 or 120?
Somewhere in that number.
Somewhere in that number.
No, sir, we really.
So you don't care where it comes
get to
from?
180,000 tons, and we really don't care where it comes from.
Okay. I mean, I'm just looking at growth. When you get 30 years out, we may have, you don't know what, none of us have a crystal ball to know what's going on. We may have another 200,000 people here.
Well,
don't anticipate it. Don't think that'll happen.
Not at our present growth rate.
No.
Not off your historical growth rate, that's for certain. But if you do, the one thing I would like to point out is by having the additional money that would be generated to the county through the host fee or through what's left of between the spread between the gate rate and our operating, you would be able to build money and potentially look to beyond 30 years, and you'll have the money to buy another landfill, piece of land, develop that land, and be able to look out for the constituents beyond that period of time.
I've got a question. It's on the 3 alternatives. If we take the landfill only option and we would do part of it and you would do part of it, what is the difference in the termination of personnel?
none as far as that's concerned, as far as the personnel is concerned. On the landfill-only piece, we would only guarantee the people that are currently at the landfill itself. As far as the operators, you would run the scale house, so you would keep those people.
That's kind of what I was wondering, is if the turnkey, you would have the option of phasing out all the people and replacing them, but with the landfill only, how many people as opposed to the other?
I think there's 9 people.
I think.
10, we had 10 built in there.
Yeah.
3 for MRF and then 7 between, truck drivers and gate attendants and
That's
things
what
like
we
that.
would retain. The rest would go as Santec employees.
Yeah, it's not that they wouldn't have a job, it's just that they wouldn't be involved in the county program,
Right.
retirement program.
And we need operators and drivers and mechanics, things
I
of that
understand that.
nature. And they have the skill set we're looking for.
See, a lot of them over there, have worked a good deal of time and have built up, a good retirement with the county, and they would be kind of starting over.
Yeah.
The other question that came up, and this is not something that's come up lately, but it was something that we looked at early on, was, if we look at the current landfill and the current operation of the landfill with what we are doing now, without Santec being involved in anything, but we had talked about before of us actually, losing, a landfill, because of Waste Management and other companies coming into Davidson County and pulling their stuff off, and we get less and less and less. At some point in time, we would not be able to run a landfill at a break-even point, much less a profit. Has that study still been done?
I don't know that there's an actual study. I mean, these guys are aware we are too, you know. The other thing you have to factor in is the cost of hauling it all the way down there. That's pretty expensive too. There's always that possibility, because I know Randolph County and Montgomery have those mega landfills and are trying to generate business, but, we've still been pretty steady with both of them open in between 120 and 127,000 tons, so.
Probably the biggest risk is them on an acquisition basis looking to acquire companies that are currently delivering waste to the landfill. Because
Yeah,
if
that's
they
what
do
we had
that,
talked
they
about
will
before.
Revert that. That will happen, and they are in the acquisition. We are also in the acquisition mode as well, so that's something we would also look at to help secure the volume that's currently feeding the landfill.
But if the, and it's just I'm thinking, that's dangerous, but if you had, the bigger the landfill, the less they can actually charge for folks to put their garbage over there.
There is a scale, yes, sir.
And if they get to where they're charging a lot less than what we're charging, then we're gonna lose that business. This is something that we talked about early on, I think, David. Just wondered if that was still.
That's exactly right, Mr. McClure. The thing that you have to consider there is the fact that we know, even through the public press, that the company that's operating in Randolph County has guaranteed the county X number of dollars per year, which is quite substantial. Certainly more than what's on this scenario for either of the turnkey or the fixed fee operation. Whenever a company can guarantee that kind of funds, it is rest assured that they're going to saturate that market to be able to maintain that commitment that they have financially to the local government there. And so that's what this process that we've been working through with your staff is to give Davidson County that continuity and that stability, so that hopefully that does not happen. We can't guarantee it, but based on this operational agreement, we're taking that risk along with you as the owner. So, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, other questions down there? None? What, I got a question here. I look at the numbers. This is from Matt. For the county, when the county runs it, if I'm reading this right, I guess, the 20-year price is both numbers included, right? So, in the turnkey.
Yeah, they don't add up, it's just all years.
Yeah, so, from 10 years to 20 years with the county, you only increase about $250,000.
Right, and the way typically in the county, we haven't moved fees very much. So the way I built that model was kind of assuming the board would continue that and then just raise fees enough to stay in the positive, which is why.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, it looks like you're gonna run the landfill for 10 years for $250,000. Am I reading this right?
No, that's the net revenue. That's the net above, Jeff, how would you explain, above?
What he's saying is there's only a $300,000 difference between 10 years and 20 years.
Right, in net profit. You can think of it in terms of profit. Actually running the landfill for those last 10 years, the expenses would be over $5 million, like $5.5 million a year. But the revenue is just about $25,000 a year over that, or whatever it is for the given year.
Well, the first 10 years, you're gonna make 2.3 million.
Right.
The next 10 years, you're gonna make 300,000.
Right.
Something's wrong. You know, somewhere you're gonna get in a bind, in my opinion.
Right, you could raise fees further to increase it, make it balance out.
There's not been an appetite over the last 7 or 8 years to raise fees, so we basically just run it at a sustaining rate.
Mm-hmm.
The rate was being driven by the expenses. I mean, we could run the rates up to the $45 and the $46, and our numbers would look pretty similar to the other two. But, you know, we just chose to keep it self-sustaining.
Like I say, those numbers look awful tight to me for 10 years, so I think it'd be pretty hard to meet those numbers. I mean, you know, sometimes you can't leave your rate at
Right.
36.
Right.
I mean, because you gotta have equipment, and that gives you 300,000. Of course, I guess you got money in there for equipment.
Yes.
For those 10 years, some sort of number, what, like a 4% number?
We got money for equipment and opening phases, yes.
What's the significant cause of the difference between the 20-year turnkey and the 20-year landfill only? I mean, that's a huge amount.
Absolutely. In the landfill only, we have limited risk, very limited risk, and in the turnkey, we're obviously operating the recycle center, maintaining the post-closure for the phase 1 site, and we're dealing with the leachate issue, which is, over time, will be a much larger issue for Davidson County. So that, and the inherent risk associated with cell construction and future cost is what drives that number. Your 8.5% in the turnkey builds over time, stays 8.5%, but our risk goes up because we're trying to determine how we keep that 180,000 tons a year going into that site.
And if the recycling goes south, which is, we have seen it over the past few years, that the recycling has actually dried up in some instances. But there's nothing in there saying that y'all can come back and say, I'm sorry, this recycling thing is, not what we thought it'd be, so we're looking at some more money, or we're gonna raise the fees.
Not in a turnkey scenario.
Okay.
In a turnkey scenario, that's on our dime, and that's some of the inherent risks that we take. We honestly don't see the recycled commodity market coming back to anything like it was previously. We actually anticipate, and this is kind of built into our model, that the processing cost for recycled material will eventually be closer to $100 a ton in the next 10 years versus what you're paying $29 today to Waste Management. If you look at rates south of here, and I can say in the Gulf Coast area and on the East Coast, recycled processing, what you pay somebody to take your recycled material is about $100 a ton today.
So basically, the difference between those two is the risk that,
yes,
avoidance that the county would be getting into by turnkey, as opposed to accepting some of the risk on the other end.
And that's exactly right, and that's the way we talk to staff about it. It's about the amount of risk that the county wants to share.
Thank you.
I've got one thing. So you don't see the Chinese getting back interested in the recycling business again?
Absolutely not. When you look at what's happening in China for years ignored every environmental concern that there was, and for lack of a better way of putting it, the US was using China as a little bit of a dumping ground for material that should have never been processed to begin with. I don't see that changing. Actually, they're going from a 0.5% contamination, which is not in current technology achievable in the United States, to now they want zero contamination, if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Could we have as part of, as part of our consideration, yeah, I don't know whether it's possible or not, but could we have what those risks are that we would be assuming?
Yeah, they would, you mean now or in the contract? Future.
With the contract, whether it's turnkey or whether it's landfill?
Those will be in the contract, yes.
Okay, if we go in the landfill, that's what I wanna know, is to be able to look down there and have a list. This is a risk that we would be giving up for turnkey or accepting for the landfill.
These guys can do that.
I know y'all didn't project these numbers out, but I'm looking at, Sandtech turnkey. From 10 years to 20 years, it doubles. So does it double from 10-year to 30-year?
I don't think we've gone out that far, have we, Matt?
The way it's built is the fee on the turnkey, it should increase basically parallel, where our money's increasing as theirs are. So I don't see any reason why it wouldn't.
See, theirs goes from 2.6 million, 2.7 million in 10 years to almost 6 million in 20 years.
Right.
So that's double.
Yeah, but you gotta realize, they gotta build up to the 180, so in the model, they're not doing 180 in the first 5 years, it's building up over 5 years to get to the 180. So that's why the first 10 years is not as much as the 20 years.
Yeah, but I'm comparing it to ours, you know, I mean, I'm comparing.
Yeah.
We only got 300,000 in the first 10 years, and I understand you saying you're trying to keep the rate down as low as you can.
On the turnkey model I made, you're looking at about $330,000 net revenue to the county a year, and that's basically continuing to grow slowly, a few thousand a year. So I wouldn't see any reason why it wouldn't continue to grow about that rate. So you're looking at another $3.5 million for the next 10 years. Past that is what I would estimate.
I would agree with that, Casey.
Okay.
We got the models, we could probably get Matt to go back through it and mimic.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
He'll get you for that.
He's in the right chair.
We could mimic the fee increases that are projected by Sandtech, and our numbers will probably look better over that time period. I mean, we can model that. It's just, we chose in our model to try to stay pretty much profit neutral to keep the fees as low as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you're still only $2 a ton cheaper than the middle number.
$2 a ton times 180,000 is almost $360, and then so 360 over.
I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about as a contractor, $2 a ton is not a whole lot more than.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, as far as me as a hauling contractor, I wouldn't be
Right.
suppressed over $2 a ton.
But you're looking at conservative guys that know that there's not been an appetite for raising fees, so we assumed very little fee increase. I mean, we could have gotten aggressive, but we just chose to stay very conservative.
Yeah, I'm one of the most conservative, I think, so. But they,
And that contract that allows all the commissioners to use landfill for free. I went out there and paid $8 the other day, that depressed me. I'm just kidding, thank you.
Which that is in line, by the way, with other areas.
well, I think we're the cheapest around already, you know? And I think this landfill's been losing money for the past, how many years? Or breaking even?
But we had to catch up on post-closure, but we've been pretty much break even for the last 5.
Just break even.
But, which is where we tentatively try to stay because of, fee increases.
To be able to serve.
The only problem with that is, what are you gonna do about a future landfill? That's one of my concerns. Now, you can say you wanna break even all you want to, but 30 years from now, we're gonna have a problem. We're gonna need a new piece of plot for a landfill, unless we're gonna haul it to Randolph County or
Yeah, and I'm probably gonna be the only one on this board then, huh?
You probably will, you probably will. You was here when this one was started. You'll be here then. So that is one of my concerns.
Yeah,
I mean,
mine
I think
too.
You think you really need to think about it. I mean, we ain't gonna get a new landfill breaking even. And I guess this one was bought when? When did we get in the landfill business?
I don't know.
In the eighties?
And additional land out there's been purchased over time.
We purchased
We
land.
bought some adjoining property or whatever, but I don't think there's really any more there. Is there much property there that can be bought later?
You have a creek that runs by the property, you have public road, and you have houses on one side, and you have the railroad easement. We don't see the existing landfill being able to grow beyond those boundaries. The wetlands mitigation associated with moving a creek would be phenomenally expensive. Even if it could be done.
I think we got enough information.
Yeah, one other question I got. How long does it take to permit a new landfill?
You would wanna have the land purchased 10 years out. You would have a couple of years of engineering, probably at least a year and a half of state review, and then you would need to build the infrastructure prior to running out of airspace at the existing facility. So your 7 to 10 years is what we look at as a company before we go through an expansion or something like that. We make sure that we always have 10 years.
So you start looking for your property 10 years before you're ready to
Absolutely.
start putting trash in there. So it ain't something that's gotta be done right away, but I think the sooner it's done, and that way,
You never wanna wait till 30 years, because just because you purchase property, until you do the hydro study, which is basically boring wells into the land and seeing where the groundwater is, you can't design the facility and know what the capacity is. And that's really, goes back to the Randolph County for just a moment, if I could. Randolph County started as a new landfill, and they're building it out. As that landfill gets a little bit older, it becomes significantly more efficient, and they'll be able to leverage that efficiency from a pricing perspective at that time.
what's the new acreage? You know, it's like a lot of other things as years move along. What is the sought after piece of the size of property for a new landfill now? Is it
Realistically, based off of buffer zones, infrastructure development, and depending on the life of the landfill you're looking for, most people want the landfill, most counties want the landfill to be a 50-plus year investment. You're looking at 300-plus acres probably, if you wanted to look at it that way. And that's assuming you could develop the site.
right? Okay, I got one other question and we'll be done. I noticed in this contract here, really we get penalized. I'm not saying penalized. We don't have, and not a contract in these projections, in the year after 5 years or whatever, that's when y'all hope to get to 180,000 ton. I guess that's what I heard over here from staff. It's year 5. I thought it was before that, but what if,
The volume in our model growing about 10% a year till we get to the established cap. And as soon as again, it depends on if you're looking at the operating agreement. In the operating agreement, there's a step down in tiered rate structure as soon as we go over 150,000 tons. I don't think that's reflected in your number, because you have the base number moving out.
Right.
But it reduces the departmental rate, and it actually increases. That's where part of that increase in additional money to the county comes from, is that step down in structure.
so that's not in your numbers?
That would only be on the,
It's $1 a ton.
right, for the
across
management
board
fee.
In the management fee, so it's about $180,000 understated at that point in time for the duration of the contract.
So my point is, we penalize a little bit, and I see where you're at, but we penalized a little bit if you don't make it to the 150 or the 160.
Just in that step down standpoint.
Okay. All right, I'm done. So, anybody else, got any questions?
I guess if it's permissible with the board, I'll let y'all kind of chew over these numbers and then, get back on the 11th or the 25th?
25th.
25th?
I would prefer the 25th, that way the chairman will be back by then.
Yeah. Some serious big dollars we talking, so,
Thank you for your
thank you.
time.
Thank you very much.
I wanna thank Stantec, they worked extremely hard to be amenable to our request, like I say, they're probably tired of seeing us too, so.
All right, thank you. Do I have a, motion to, go into closed session?
After about 5.
Yeah, after 5?
Except for Zach, he can go
Yeah.
on to closed session.
Yeah, both of them close session.
Motion and second, all in favor? Open.
Motion open.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I might have to get a note from Zeb, 'cause I missed the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, in closed session, the board considered 3 matters under attorney-client. In 2 of the matters, there was no action taken. In 1 of the matters, the board gave direction to council for further action. Nothing else at this point, thank you.
All right, anything else?
Adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.